Here is his 11 honors, and we do have vocabulary that we did. And so I'd like you to look at the questions. You have these 3 through 7, and we'll just read through them. I didn't ask you if you've done them. I'll go ahead and give you credit for them in a minute. You have them. Would you mind reading? This is chapter 3. We'll just quickly go through them, and then we're going to read together. I'd rather do it that way rather than this way. I'm assuming you read, and we'll go over the questions. I don't really like to go over the questions. I'd rather talk about it in the context, but we do this every now and then, yeah.
Have you got my phone?
Yeah, you're gonna need it, yeah.
I don't know if I got a copy of the questions.
You have these. And I just gave you some, right?
Of what?
Didn't I just give, you should have those, right?
Yeah, he got the vocab.
All right.
Oh,
Oh, I haven't passed out the new questions, I'm sorry. I'll give you, I have some new ones. All right, so Pam, you mind reading chapter 3, number 1?
People are often placed in a position where their own personal needs and desires are in conflict with the demands of society. How is the situation illustrated in a sense? Is that he or
Yeah.
he was in a moving box?
Yeah, he says that when they're marching in chapter 3. Chapter 1, it's all about the past. And then he's hearing the news, they may march, they may be on the march, they may go into battle. Chapter 2 is those first efforts, nothing happens, they dig holes and they hide behind rocks and then they move on. And so nothing's going on. Chapter 3 is more the same. As we get into, I can't remember the chapter right offhand, but anyway, so they're marching, and so the questions are pointing you to the fact that this is really psychological. This book is more than about war. It's
Yeah.
about the psychology of war, and even more than that, the psychology of youth. So, how would you answer that question? And the question is, his personal demands are put on hold because of he's in the army. He can't do what he wants to do. He said he was in a moving box. That's how it felt to him as they marched, probably 4 abreast, 3 abreast down a road. Can you answer that question?
Well, I was kind of confused on like the moving part. I didn't really.
Well, it feels like a box because he's literally surrounded by other soldiers. They're on his left, on his right, they're in front of him, they're behind him. But it's not stationary, they're marching. The question really is, how does that illustrate this idea that, he can't do what he wants to do anymore?
So I guess like, he's kind of thinking of like what he needs or what he wants, but he can't, since they're like in a moving box, he can't like do that.
Yeah,
because-
you're literally hemmed in, front, back, and around. Remember, up to this point, what did he want to do when he was thinking they're going into battle? First thing he does is what? He hears about it, then what does he do? What physical movement? He turns away, he goes into the tent, and he's thinking, he has a conversation with Jim Conklin, but he can't do that now. He's forced to march. How about Jeff, number 2?
Explain the following sentences. A hated lieutenant who had no appreciation for fine minds. He was a mere
I'm
brute.
sorry about the typing, it's mirror. And he does something, he stands and looks at this corpse, kind of gets distracted, and Lieutenant pushes him, let's keep moving. What does he mean by that? Then why don't you turn around and let's see if you can get focused, please. You want to answer that one, Jeff?
It didn't really appear that the lieutenant really he was kind of like devoid of emotion.
The lieutenant.
Yeah. Lieutenant.
Isn't that what you want in your lieutenants?
I mean, yeah, it was kind of an observation.
I think you're right.
About that.
Why is that a good thing? Why is it a good thing what he's doing? Henry hated him because he corrected him.
Yeah, he's keeping them in order, keeping them focused. So, I mean, yeah, it's not a negative thing. It's just
Right.
something that he had friction with.
And I think I've told you, one of the first things that helped me grow up was my experience playing high school football, because it was hard. It was really hard, and it was out of my comfort zone. But I stuck. I mean, fortunately, I never thought of quitting. I think that's when you get, it's really a challenge, when you're in something difficult, and the thought occurs to you, I don't have to do this. I never once thought that, because I wanted to do it. It didn't, the rewards for it were hugely greater than the difficulties out that we went through. It was just hard, you hit people, that wasn't so hard, but then you have to hit them again, you get sore, but, they push you beyond what you're comfortable doing. I don't wanna run any more hills, I don't wanna run any more sprints, can't you see? But you do it anyway, and you realize, man, I did something I didn't think I could do. That to me is part of what he's growing up. Oddly enough, we all wanted to be adults, you always wanted to be teenagers, as a kid. You thought that represented freedom, and then the older you get, you realize, where's this freedom I was looking for? I've got more responsibilities as a 20-year-old than I ever had as a 16-year-old, even though I was hemmed in by school and family, sports, my time was scheduled. I go to college, and they don't tell me have to be anywhere. They don't even tell me have to go to class. A lot of schools don't even require class. They just have to be there and take the test. And you got all this time, and now it's your responsibility to fill it. I'd rather somebody tell me where to go. Frankly, sometimes you tell me where to go. I'm tired of trying to figure out where to eat or what to do with this. I got a whole afternoon with nothing to do. Yeah.
The good thing about not quitting is that in the future, you're not gonna regret anything. Or like you're not gonna like.
Have
really
you ever
regret
quit
it.
something you regretted?
Uh-huh.
Me too.
Like on a test, where I just quit during the test.
Yeah.
Get a bad grade.
I have too, and I guess I'm glad that I learned that lesson. That I quit something, and I'd give anything to go back and unquit. At the time, I know why I quit. I was tired of it. I was actually I ran cross-country and track my freshman year at Carolina, and I wasn't nearly as good as everybody else. And I was with some world-class runners, and I just couldn't, I was actually getting better. That's the part nobody ever reminded me. You are a lot better than you were last year. And yet, nobody told me that, so I kind of believed the lie. And so I didn't run after that, and I wish I had stuck through it. That's real. Did you have something? Probably, yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's a really good lesson. Anyway, that's number 2. How about 3, Hartley?
Explain a sentence. Veteran regiments in the Army were
Likely, it's supposed to say.
were likely to be very small operations of men. How do you account the veteran soldiers laughing at the sight of Moncrief's regiment?
Yeah, it's supposed to be him. This is actually a typewriter, if you didn't know this. It's not a computer looking like a typewriter.
Did you typewrite it?
I did,
That's
a
cool.
long
You have
time
one?
ago, and I've never had the motivation to, translate. I don't anymore. But
That's really
at one
awesome.
point I did, and I've never been motivated. But all I have to do is pull it out here, and we can basically read it, so. What do you think why do you think they laugh at the size of the regiment?
Well, it was like smaller and.
Which was smaller, the veterans or the,
Harry's-
it's just the opposite.
Oh, veterans.
But that's why it's important. The veteran regiment was smaller, they're laughing at the larger regiment. Do you know why? Because I think Alistair
Oh,
does.
Because the Neuro Regiment hasn't actually been into battle and they haven't gotten people killed.
That's right. Yeah, they didn't replace them. You just, I guess if you got too small, they would disband you or put you in part of another one. So that's why they laughed at him. How about Sarah?
This is number 4.
Yeah.
War is described as the red animal war, the blood-swollen god. Why is war called both an animal? I said it is an animal because it can be like brutal and violent.
Very good.
And then it's a god because it's like fighting for something like good and something you believe in.
Fighting for good, did you say? In what other way might it be a God with a little g? Yeah.
It seems like it's, I wouldn't say omnipotent, but it's like, it's very there.
Yeah, it's all consuming. It demands all of you and almost, and some people kind of worship it. I think the guys who call the shots, maybe generals, and maybe they really like that, they kind of like the idea of this is kind of I wouldn't say fun, but it's rewarding battles. Anyway, some people look at it that way. How about, moving on to chapter 4? Well,
What is the general condition of the youth's mind and perception amongst the midst of chaos and battle? I guess he's like really anxious and nervous of whether or not he's gonna flee, I would say. And then at one point, he kinda just sat back and like looked at the entire thing. And he was very poetic about it at one point, then he went back to being scared.
yeah, and he's also an observer. That's one thing that his role his role is as an observer. He's actually watching it like Huck was an observer, except in this case, Henry doesn't tell us he's not narrating like Huck was. How about, Lillian?
The youth is very frightened and determined to run it and resolves to get one view of the composite monster, the enemy. Why?
So, I don't know if you're aware of this, but right before the battle started, he said, I'm gonna run. I've been wondering about it for weeks now. Am I gonna fight? Am I gonna run? I'm gonna run. And it kinda gave him a little peace. At least I know what I'm gonna do. But then that remark, he wanted to hang around at least to see the enemy. What's the point of it?
I think he was just curious, maybe, just to like see what it was actually like, and maybe he was second guessing whether or not he should run.
I don't think you did hear it. Go ahead.
What?
Just repeat that.
Oh, I think he was just curious, and he was kind of second guessing his thoughts about running away, so he like looked out.
To me, it's like I don't know, the syndrome, just the instinct of driving by an accident. You just want to see what happens. And they always tell you, they'll do that because it slows traffic down, it can actually cause an accident. But it's just something instinctive. We want to see, wow, what happened? What, anybody hurt, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
And he's the same way. Even though it could kill him, he wants to see what this enemy looked like. He's been thinking about it his whole life. At least he wants to, he'd hate to run before the enemy showed up. He wouldn't even know what he was running away from. Jameson.
On the fringe of battle, men talk. What do they reveal about themselves? And all I said was that they just like revealed their feelings, like they're all nervous.
And they're all different, and they're all young, and they're all, they're just all over the place. There's nothing profound about it. It's just that they're talking about things, about age. Right.
I said.
Then try to
Oh, do you want me to
stay
read?
focused.
Do you want me to read?
Yes,
the
and
question?
answer.
How is the gap between officers and soldiers brought out in this chapter? I said it was like they like treat them like a freshman kind of.
Good. That's really good.
One of the things that you notice, first of all, the officer's on horseback, except for the lieutenant, he's on the ground with him, but the officers are behind them. Literally, they're not gonna be there when the battle starts. They're gonna be behind the lines. And they kinda treat the units like puzzle pieces, or like chess pieces would be a better one. I need to move this piece here. They can't be too worried about, these are somebody's sons and maybe fathers, and maybe, these are human beings. They can't think in those terms. They think, we need this unit over there, and, some of you are gonna die. So they gotta get over that, and they gotta put people in that position. That's one of the separations. Remember, the first part of the story is separation. And it's Henry separating himself from the, army by wandering off, and in his mind, he's doubting. Well, this is, the veterans are separate from the rookies, they make fun of them, and the officers are separate from the enlisted men. How about 9?
The sights and sounds of battle reflect its turmoil and terror. Make a list of words and phrases conveying battle sights and sounds.
Well, we'll do that today, not here, because it's true throughout the book, so if you don't have anything there, that's fine. but we'll run into words and phrases that'll be similar to that. Just have two more of these chapters. Let's go to Robbie, if you would, number 10.
In what ways does the youth see his past way before his eyes as the possibility of death and battle shall
Okay, we're in beginning of chapter 5, and if you have any thoughts about that, I'm just looking back myself. All I can say is he's been, for some time, he's been thinking about why he came here and why did I sign up for this? He even thinks at one point that he didn't sign up for it. They forced him to do it. What were you gonna say?
Doesn't he sort of like, basically just like why am I here? Like,
Right. And like he blames other people for, I didn't wanna come. We know he wanted to come. He came despite the fact that his mother didn't want him to come. And now that he's in it, he's trying to blame people, other people, for it. How about 11, Ben?
How do the actions of the youth show that he is in the grip of evolutionary animal instincts?
Well, let's set the context. If you would, I think it would be helpful, look at the first page of chapter 5. And I would call this baptism by fire, or first battle. So this is the first time that he's been in battle. It's what the book has been building up to. That's really helpful to me to do that with every chapter. There are no titles, they're just numbers. And so he begins to fight. And the way it's described, he loads, because it's, you have to load it over and over. You shoot, you load, you shoot, you load. So that's what he's doing. But he becomes like an assembly line. And so he does it over and over. He doesn't think about it. He just becomes like a machine. That's probably helpful. That's why they've been trained. Not to think about it, just do your job. Like you're at an assembly line. You're putting one object into another. You're fixing something, making something. That's how it feels at first. It's just unconscious shooting, loading, shooting. Everybody else is. And so he's there too. So that would be he's doing it because everybody else is doing it. How about Emma? Chapter 6. By the way, chapter 5 they attack and they retreat. And I just want to read the last paragraph of chapter 5 before Emma reads this question. As he gazed around him, the youth thought a flash of astonishment at the blue, pure sky. Circle or underline that. The blue, pure sky and the sun gleaming on the fields, trees and fields. It was surprising that nature had gone tranquilly on with her golden process in the midst of so much devilment. That's really pretty. We may have said this. We did in the other class anyway. What's being suggested when he realizes that despite all people were dying, there was smoke and bloodshed and all this, but then when it was over, nature was really beautiful. The sky was blue, the sun gleamed on the trees. So what is that sort of symbolic of? Well, nature, yeah. Okay, let me just suggest this. Nature is ignoring them. It's like nature doesn't care about them. And the other, you could take it a step further, which is what the writer does. He would also say God is ignoring them. It's like, this doesn't matter. Nature is doing its thing. Ben, I appreciate if you wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Nature is doing its thing and ignoring what these people are going through. And by sort of, in implication, God is also, these people like Crane didn't believe God was actively involved in life. He was watching it, but didn't get involved. And some of them probably didn't even believe in God at all. So, but the fact that nature, wow, it's a beautiful day, this awful thing is happening, and it's such a beautiful day. You'd think it'd be raining and, the weather would sort of reflect what was going on, and not at all. So that's what happens in 5. He's actually, you know, he actually stands there and fights. So I guess his questions are answered. So Emma, would you read?
Give examples to show how the youth is under the influence of group psychology.
You can skip that one, go to 13.
In what ways is the youth now in a position from which to regard himself?
Well, just physically, what's he doing now? He fought, and now he's not fighting. So literally, what is he now doing? He can now step back and look at what he did. Before, he's like a machine. Load, shoot, load, and all of a sudden that's over. And there are wounded around him, but he can now kind of contemplate what's going on. That's really all that means. Sign number 14.
Why is Henry in an ecstasy of self-satisfaction? I'm saying he feels that way because like that little battle was over, everything was starting to look good again.
And it was, but now how do you think he feels about himself?
Pretty good because he fought.
He's a hero. I guess his questions are answered. I've been wondering, I'd even decided I was gonna run. I forgot to run. No, it wasn't, all of a sudden I forgot that I was supposed to run, and boy, I'm glad I didn't, like Ben, I'm glad I didn't quit. I stood this thing out and I made it. And he starts to feel like he's, you know, he's arrived, which is always a mistake. How about it?
Having passed the Supreme Trial, the youth feels deep self-confidence and self-satisfaction a moment later with the coming of the second attack. How panics and runs?
He panics.
He panics and runs. What is your explanation for this reversal?
All right, so 1 minute, he's a hero. Man, I did it. I fought. Here they come again. I run. How do you explain that? It seemed perfectly logical to me, but I would like to know what you think. Why does that make sense? Do
I
you?
think he was just shocked that it happened again. He was having a quick switch in emotions, so he was just running because it was his instinct to run.
Yeah, it's like he did the hard thing, and then he was rewarded, and he relaxed, and here they come again, and he's not ready for the next thing. Like you said, that's just too shocking. What does it take to be an adult? I'm thinking of men here, but for women too. What's one of the things in the context of what we just learned? He thought he was a hero, and now he runs. What can we learn about the process of growing up? Yeah.
You should probably be able to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I mean, just because you did one thing today doesn't mean you've arrived. Can you do it again tomorrow? We've talked about that. At one point, like school, when you get a job, the thing about a job is you do it every day. And you gotta get up tomorrow, and you do it. And then you gotta get up tomorrow, and then you gotta do it next year and the year after. Maybe not the same job, but some job, and I hope it's a job you love. But even those jobs get tiring after a while, and you gotta do it every day. You don't work for a little bit and have a summer vacation. Even teachers, by the way, I taught for 30 years in public schools, and I was unemployed for 2 months if I didn't get a job. So I got a job. I got jobs every summer, because otherwise I'd take a 2-month vacation, unpaid vacation. And so I had to find work. I looked forward to September, because then because the work usually wasn't great. We painted houses, we painted schools. I taught summer school. You just do whatever you can to make some money. I don't recommend that. I'd really rather have taught all year, because I would have gotten the same paycheck, and it was consistent. I didn't have to go out and find something. But that's what being a man is. It's, you gotta do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. And that's not real dramatic or glamorous, but it's part of it. How about B? Would you read that? Jack?
How does this reversal illustrate what appears to be a consistent tendency in the youth's
Jim.
Yeah, people have said they don't like him for this in the other class. So why is that typical? The fact that he fought now, but then he runs?
Maybe it's like saying the younger people are not as confident in fighting and they get scared more easily.
That's true. At least about this young person, I'd argue that a whole bunch of people didn't run. They're just as old as he was. They stood and they fought. So I'm not sure it's a sign of being young, but what have we said about him? One thing that's consistent about him. He's inconsistent. That's the only consistency he has, that he's not consistent. Yes, he second guesses himself, and he doesn't stick with something. How about 16, Alistair?
It is difficult for you to rationalize, to find explanations of his own acts that will satisfy his need for self-approval. How is this tendency illustrated in connection with his panicking and fleeing that is the following? His view of the enemy, his observations of the behavior of his fellow soldiers, and his reaction to the general. Well, he justifies it with the view of the enemy, like they were charging him, charging his position.
But what did he call them? What did he say about them? I can tell you, I was just gonna try.
Flowers bursting into fierce bloom.
Yeah, that was,
Good stuff.
I don't have a page number for you, but I'm gonna read you some words. Why don't you write these down? He calls them imps, IMPS, those are little devils. He calls them dragons. He calls them monsters. He exaggerates the enemy. This is part of his rationalization. He exaggerates, like nobody could stand up to them. They're impossible to defeat. They're like monsters and dragons and devils. But now that he's run, what does he say about his own comrades?
That he had worked with them for a bit, and he saw what they did as, I guess, the right thing to do.
That's what you would hope, but no, the answer is he saw what they did as the wrong thing to do. And that's part of the rationalization. He calls them idiots, fools. And how does that make him feel better? He's running, they're not, and he thinks of them, they're fools, they're idiots not to run. How is this rationalization? I was the smart one. I saw this thing, we were gonna get creamed, and I didn't wanna do that, so I just left. You're too stupid to run. I'm the smart one. What you said earlier would have been the right thing to say. These guys were the brave ones, he was the coward. But when you rationalize something, I think I've told you this example when I was, again, over there, some kid, he didn't make the JV basketball team, taught ninth graders often. And so, he became a Dudley fan. So I'm not gonna, Dudley's gonna beat Page, and he was just talking about how bad Page was. He didn't make the team, but he was putting himself in a position to say that, Page wasn't any good anyway. He's not realizing what it says about him, that he didn't make a bad team. That's rationalization, make you feel better. Yeah, this just simply makes him feel better. And finally, about the generals.
And it's usually a lie too.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it's obvious a lot that,
You wanna make yourself feel better, but not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Most rationalizations are lies. They're not true. And yet you're saying these wrong things in order to make you feel better about yourself. And then he says, what about the generals? He says they're idiots also.
That's always good.
The officers, the generals are also, I think that was, say his reaction to the general. Well,
What is that noise? What is it?
it's the air.
Why is it like?
And then stops.
It's loud.
It like stops and starts.
Until you said something, I didn't even notice it. I've been in here like 12 years in this room, and it's always been like that. You just never noticed it. All right, so let's start with chapter 7. We're gonna add to that last question. Yeah.
Oh, back to the bathroom.
Somebody out there, right there, wait till she gets back. All right, we won't do this right now, but number 17, you can just kind of mark that off. We'll come back to that. So I think we are back at Tucker. I'm gonna ask you to start reading for us. We've got about 20 minutes, probably not that long. Let's see how much we can read. And you've got the questions, or we'll have the questions. I don't wanna stop and answer these. Would you give this to Kane? Or send it back. These are the rest of the questions for the book. You shouldn't need any more, so just hang on to these.
Hey, what if? Yeah, it used to be 8 feet.
All right, so we're gonna start with Tucker.
Yeah.
Look, yeah,
On chapter 4, I don't think we answered number 9.
did you read it?
It says the sights and sounds of battle reflect its turmoil and terror.
Guys, I can't hear her.
Make a list of words.
She's right here and I can't hear her. One more time.
You make a list of words and phrases conveying battle sights and sounds.
We'll come back to that. So this is number 7. Notice what happens. He runs away because he's smarter than they are. He saw it coming. There's no way we can survive. These are dragons. These are monsters. And I'm just smarter than they are. And if you stay back, you're an idiot. All right, then as he crosses, he's heading away from the front line, and he sees a general. And I'll just read that part before you read it. It says, yes, by heavens, they have. As the officer leaned forward, his face was aflame with excitement. Yes, by heavens, they've held him. They've held him. And the last line is he had a little carnival of joy on horseback. So his predictions that the army was defeated, his desires that they were, proved false. They actually held their ground. And so that's where we pick it up, number 7, or chapter 7.
The youth preached as if discovered in crime. By heavens, they have run the imbecile line, have remained unconfigured. He could hear cheering.
Again, if you're not writing your book, you're missing a great opportunity to really learn this stuff. If you're waiting just for the right answer, you probably forget it. That's why I'm asking you to write. It said he called him the imbecile line in that first stanza, and he cringed if it's discovered in a crime. What crime had he committed? It probably is a crime.
Is there any?
Yeah, he's running from battle. I don't know if that's considered a crime in this war, but you're going AWOL, absent without leave. The officer didn't tell you to run. You did that on your own. So, anyway, it turns out that they were smarter than he thought they were. Keep reading.
He lifted himself upon his toes and looked in the direction of the fight. The yellow falls lay wallowing on the treetops. From beneath it came the clatter of musketry. Hoarse cries followed him at minutes. He turned away, amazing and angry. He felt that he had been wrong.
You can keep reading.
Alright. He had fled, he told himself, because annihilation approached. He had done a good part in saving himself. It was a little piece of the army. He had considered the time, he said, to be one in which it was the duty of every little piece to rescue itself if possible. Later, the officers could fit the little pieces together again to make a battle plan. If none, the little pieces were wise enough to save themselves from the flurry of death at such a time, why, then, where would be the army? It was all plain that he had proceeded according to very correct and committed maneuvers. His actions had been sagacious. Is that sagacious?
Sagacious, which means wise.
Okay. sagacious things. They had been full of strategy.
Keep going.
They were the work of a master's
So
blade.
you see this rationalization goes on. He was just smarter. He knew that, it's better to run today and save yourself for tomorrow. We'll fight again. I'll be around tomorrow. I'm just protecting the old army. See? You gotta have some people to fight tomorrow, and that's what I decided to do. So he's still rationalizing. Pain, start there. Thoughts of his comrade.
Good, man.
Chapter 7.
Page?
45.
45. All right.
Thoughts of his comrades.
Thoughts of his comrades came to him.
Come on. Read it, right.
Thoughts of his comrades came to him. The bird of blue line had withstood the blows of war. He grew bitter over it. It seemed that the blind ignorance and stupidity of those little pieces had betrayed him. He had been overturned and crushed by their lack of sense in holding a position with intelligent deliberation would have convinced them that it was impossible. He, the enlightened man who was far in the dark, had fled because of his superior perception of knowledge. He had felt a great anger against his comrades. He knew it could be proved that they had been fools.
It's just more of the same. Jeff, you agree?
He wondered what they would remark when later he appeared in the camp. His mind heard howls of derision. Their density would not enable them to understand his sharper point of view. He began to pity himself acutely. He was ill used. He was trodden beneath the feet of an iron injustice. He had proceeded with wisdom and from the most righteous motives under heaven blue only, to be frustrated by painful circumstances. A dull, animal-like rebellion against his fellows war in the abstract, and fate here within. He shambled along with bowed head, his brain in a gulp of agony and despair. When he looked loweringly up, quivering at each sound, his eyes had the expression of those of a criminal who thinks his guilt and his punishment great, and knows that he can find no words.
But think about the range of emotions. He felt superior. He felt, like he was, when he stood there and fought. Then he changed his mind and he felt like he was smarter and they were dumb. And now he feels self-pity. He said, listen, I did the right thing. They did the wrong thing. I shouldn't feel guilty about it. He's trying to make sure he doesn't feel guilty for it. He pities himself like he's a victim. How about it?
He went from the fields to a thick wood, as if resolved to bury himself. He wished to get out of hearing the crackling shots which were to him like voices. The ground was cluttered with vines and bushes, and the trees were close and spread out like the legs. He was obliged to force his way with much noise. The creepers, crashing against his legs, carried him out harshly as their sprays were torn from the barks of trees. The swishing saplings tried to make known his presence to the world. He could not conciliate the forest as he made his way. It was always calling out protestation. When he separated embraces of trees and vines, the disturbed foliages waved their arms and turned their face leaves toward him. He dreaded lest these noisy motions and cries should bring men to look at him. So he went far, seeking dark and intricate places.
I notice where he is. Again, you need to write, you can circle it, but just easier if you just write it in the margin. He's in the woods. And I wrote the dark woods, reminds me of Dante. Remember, he was lost at the beginning of Dante. He was lost in dark woods. So it's a great symbol for, he is lost. He's literally lost. He doesn't know where he is. He knows basically where the battle is, but he's never been here before. And he's also morally lost and everything else. So that's important, yeah. Hang on just a minute. Let's, Sarah, would you read?
After a time, the sound of musketry grew faint and the cannon boomed in the distance. The sun suddenly appeared, blazing among the trees. The insects were making rhythmical noises.
irony here, it's very beautiful, very peaceful, which is what he wanted, right? He didn't want to be killed, he was worried, now he's behind, so this is kind of making him temporarily anyway, feel like he's in the right place. He's finally peaceful, the war is, well, he can probably hear the rumble, he says, of it, but it's far away. He sees a squirrel, this is a significant little story here. Do you read? Yeah.
He threw a pine cone at a jovial squirrel and he ran with shattering fear. High in a treetop he stopped and poked his head cautiously from behind a branch, looked down with an air of trepidation. The youth felt triumphant at his exhibition. It was the law, he said. Nature had given him a sign. The squirrel, immediately upon recognizing danger, had taken to his legs without ado. He did not stand stolidly bearing his furry belly to the missile, and die with an upward glance at the sympathetic heavens. On the contrary, he had fled as fast as his legs could carry him, and he was but an ordinary squirrel, to doubtless no philosopher of his race. The youth wended, feeling that nature was of his mind. She reinforced his arguments with proof that lived where the sun shone.
So how did this, he saw a squirrel, he threw something at it, a pine cone, the squirrel ran away. How does this squirrel, in his mind, justify what he's just done? Yeah,
Maybe because the squirrel was scared, so it ran away.
self-preservation. And it proves to him that, you see, I was right all along. What's wrong with that analogy?
Because it's an animal.
Yeah, it's a squirrel. So you can take the comparison only so far. Lillian.
Once he found himself almost into a swamp, he was obliged to walk upon bog tufts and watch his feet to keep from the oily mire. Pausing at one time to look about him, he saw out of some black water a small animal pounce in and emerge directly with a gleaming fish. The youth went again into the deep thickets. The brushed branches made a noise that drowned the sounds of cannons. He walked on, going from obscurity into promises of greater obscurity. At length he reached the place where the high arching boughs made a chapel. He softly pushed the green doors aside and entered. Pine needles were a gentle brown carpet. Then, with a religious half-light, near the threshold he stopped, horror-stricken at the sight of a thing.
Are we at, he was being looked at?
Yes.
He was being looked at by a dead man who was seated with his back against a column-like tree. The corpse was dressed in a uniform that once had been blue, but has now faded to a melancholy shade of green. The eyes staring at the youth had changed to the dull blue to be seen on the side of dead fish. The mouth was open. Its red had changed to an appalling yellow. Over the gray skin of the face ran little ants. One was twiddling some sort of a bundle along the upper lip. The youth gave a shriek as he confronted the dead. He was for moments turned to stone before it. He remained staring into the liquid-looking eyes. The dead man and the living man exchanged a long look. Then the youth cautiously put one hand behind him and brought it against a tree. Leaning upon his retreated step by step with his face still toward the thing. He feared that if he turned his back, the body might spring up and stiflingly pursue him.
So whenever we have another quiz, I'm definitely gonna ask you this question. What does he see in this? It's a chapel-like setting, you know, the trees are kind of hung over this way, so it's kind of like I got a roof and kind of has a door, he has to push that, so he's inside this, it's just a natural kind of sanctuary. Of course, what does he see at the end of the place? And describe, what's at least one feature? What's the one feature about this corpse that?
It's a Union soldier. It's a Union.
Yes, but what's going on with the corpse? What?
It's rotting.
Yes, can you be a little more specific?
Like, its skin report their skin is like starting to turn away from the normal shade because of, I guess, how long it's been there.
And the ants, did you notice the ants are running over his face? He says dangerously close to his mouth and his eyes.
It's always good.
Now, this is literally a turning point, because why did he run from the battle? What's the one reason he ran? He was scared of death, right? And so he's now safe, completely safe, right? He's out of hundreds of yards away, maybe half a mile away, maybe that far. And he goes in this little chapel-like place, and what does he see there? A corpse. What is that corpse? What's the irony of that?
He ran because he was scared of death.
It could have been him.
And then
That was the corpse from ago.
Right, so he keep going. Whoever was saying, I can't remember who.
It was Jackson.
Tucker. Well, he ran and he sees the corpse, and again, what does the corpse represent?
death.
And what does that do for him?
With us.
He realizes that could have been him.
And can he run away from death? No, I mean, the guy's gonna die at some point. Henry's gonna be maybe 80 years old, 70 years old, he's gonna die, there's no way to run away from it. We're not quite finished.
Jackson.
Would you, Sal, would you finish this page for us? Bear with us a couple more minutes.
Yeah,
The branches, yeah.
the branches pushing against him threatened to throw him over upon it. His unguided feet, too, caught aggravatingly in brambles, and with it all, he received a subtle suggestion to touch the corpse. As he thought of his hand upon it, he shuddered profoundly. At last, he burst the bonds which had fastened him to the spot and fled, unheeding the underbrush. He was pursued by a sight of the black ants swarming greedily upon the gray face and venturing horribly near to the eyes.
Let him finish.
After a time, he paused, and breathless and panting, listened. He imagined some strange voice would come from the dead throat and squawk after him in horrible menaces. The trees about the portal of the chapel moved, sowing softly in a soft wind. A sad silence was upon the little guarding edifice.
I'm gonna give you a heads up what's coming next. This is hang on. He sees the corpse, listen to it, and he turns around. Now, remember his reaction to the battle was to run in the opposite direction. So, he sees the corpse, he turns around. What do you think his natural reaction is gonna be? Where is he gonna run now? In the opposite direction. What is the opposite direction? So, he will be unconsciously heading for the rest of the story back to where he came from, because he can't get away from it. You don't have to read it tonight, but these words are due next Wednesday.
Well.
Hey, James.
Oh, the mine's passed.
I know it's like not so dry.
I gotta get it.
Okay, if I take this one out, and then.
You don't need to send it. I need to do that.